is just fantastic. Captain's log, subdates 211109.8. I've decided to imprison all people that misuse the copyright systems with a mandatory 5-year sentence on Titan, with it being an auto-escalated sentence to eternity for a repeat offense. Welcome everyone to the Halls of Injustice. Today we welcome inmate number 101, Daniel Smith. Daniel Smith is an abusive alcoholic control freak that loved to harm his partners and had sadistic tendencies leaning towards gratuitous displays of vulgarity, which, on the face of it, might seem a tad harsh. But I promise you that here at the Halls of Injustice, this is 100% truthful and justified for Daniel Smith. I'm also going to apologize for this picture being blurry. I couldn't find one that had a better resolution. Either that or he was desperately trying to phase out of existence. And when you consider how long he's going to be here for, the latter is possible. But due to his alcoholism, I sincerely doubt he is in fact phasing out of existence. So do enjoy your time here at the ISO Cubes. Daniel Smith is a 41-year-old dosser from the Isle of Wight that now inhabits this cell but previously had lived in Oldham. And in late 2020, Daniel started to date someone a little younger that came from Poland and lived somewhat happily here in the United Kingdom with her 3 children. Her name is Imogen. I'm not even going to pretend to know how to pronounce your last name, so out of respect for you, I'm going to just say Imogen. Imogen did reside within a supported housing complex in an apartment. This is an important detail for later. The relationship between Imogen and Daniel was a tad fractured, because he, for example, liked to control her. And his best way of doing this was by telling her that he had cancer. So manipulation from the offset. How adorable. The relationship being fractured was bad enough that on more than one occasion the police were called to her place of residence. And for the sake of it, it is because of that we then found out that Daniel Smith had a history of abusing his ex-partners, some of whom gave interviews to the police which was then passed on to the prosecution, with the descriptions reading as the following. Partner 1 had a long and significant relationship with him in the late 90s and gives an account of his controlling behavior that involved threats with knives and being thrown down the stairs. She was so distraught she contemplated taking her own life. He manipulated her by convincing her that he had been diagnosed with a cancer, but this was nothing more than a shameless lie. Partner 2. Another former girlfriend recites how she was terrorized by him during a relationship, which saw them move from the Isle of Wight to Tameside in the 2000s. Ultimately, she left him because she was convinced that he would kill her if she remained. Partner 3 described a report to the police in 2015 about Smith, her then boyfriend, had assaulted her. He also confiscating her bank cards, I think that meant confiscated, and caused her humiliation. She considered him to be a very dangerous man. I couldn't help but notice, but cancer was used on more than one occasion. How very delightful and original. On February the 18th, Imogen texted her ex to let them know that Daniel Smith had been abusive towards her, saying, "He strangled me so much I nearly died. And then he got a knife. I thought I was going to die." Back in November of 2020, a housing officer visited Imogen and noticed that she was bruised and in need of treatment. But Imogen had said that she had been stabbed in the thigh and only agreed to go for treatment if the police were not informed. Understandably, that housing officer did in fact share the information, go to the police, but the police did not take further action at the time. At 5 PM on February the 18th, Imogen actually called the police on the 112 number on 2 occasions. On the second call, she gave an account that Daniel Smith had left the property and that she would not let him back in because he had gripped her round the neck. She then sent messages via WhatsApp platform to her ex-partner, which included images of the injuries that she had sustained that day, with Gregory Johnson, the ex, telling her to go to the police, but Imogen never replied to that message. And because it was very apparent and obvious, any additional messages then received were obviously being sent by Daniel Smith, meaning he was in control of her phone. This is where it gets really dark, and I'm not sure if she was dead on the 19th of February or on the 4th of March. because the police did try contacting her via her phone, but she did not respond, and it was only when the housing officer made the welfare call on her address on the 4th of March that an investigation began. So I'm inclined to believe that on the 19th of February, Imogen was murdered by Daniel Smith. When the police attended, they found one of the most peculiar scenes you would expect out of a light B-list version of Hannibal, because Imogen had been laid on her bed. Her arms were crossed, she was clutching a bottle of perfume, a soft toy was by her neck, and there had been rudimentary attempts to clean the scene. Her legs were crossed at the ankle, and it was discovered that her body had been daubed in nail varnish with the words, "It was me." A rather disturbing exhibition, wouldn't you think? And I mentioned it was Daniel Smith early, because it was obviously him anyway. A post-mortem showed that Imogen had multiple bruises on her face, jaw, scalp and neck, consistent with attempted strangulation, plus stab wounds to her neck and body, one separating a rib bone and others penetrating her lung and heart. After this, Daniel Smith had activated Imogen's phone with a new SIM card and used her bank card 38 times to buy alcohol from local shops, with her account being found to be overdrawn by £400. On the 5th of March, less than a day after the investigation began, Daniel Smith was arrested and admitted to killing Imogen, saying he was drunk at the time, but he could remember why he attacked her, which is a tad contradictory because the defending, Benjamin Knight, said that Daniel Smith does not remember the stabbing, but did recall placing her with her favourite perfume bottle and a soft toy on the bed, saying this was not to create a spectacle, but placing her in some form of peaceful position in his mind. He does not really recall what he was thinking, only that it seemed to be the right thing to do, although he accepts objectively that does not make any sense, which is 100% correct. It makes zero sense. For the sake of understanding his previous track record from a criminal record standpoint, he has convictions for assault, kidnap, and false imprisonment. Well, we can add murder to this one, and if it wasn't obvious enough, murder comes with a far more severe sentence. So before we get to the sentence, because yes, Daniel Smith, inmate 101, was found guilty, I want to now look at the law for this, because the Crown Prosecution Service provides some rather detailed information when it comes to intent, causation, alternative counts and verdicts, and sentencing itself, which is derived from sections 269 and 270 of the Criminal Justice Act 2003, which requires the court to have regard to the general principles set out in Schedule 21 of the Criminal Justice Act of 2003, which governs the approach to fixing the minimum term, which you can get from sentencing guidelines right here. For an adult, it ranges from 15 to 30 years, or life, essentially, unless you're under the age of 18, in which case, 12 years. Now yes, there are mitigating factors, aggravating and mitigating factors, and they will undoubtedly, in the context of Daniel Smith, play a part in the sentence. I think a significant degree of planning or premeditation, mental, physical suffering inflicted upon the victim before death, will play a significant role in the following sentence. So Daniel Smith, guilty of murder, was sentenced to life in prison. Not a whole life term, but life with a minimum term of 17 years in prison, meaning by the time he leaves prison he will be 58 years old, at least. Judge Patrick Field QC, upon sentencing, said, "It seems likely that you killed Imogen on or after February 18th. That was the date when she called the police and she sent messages to her former partner, complaining of being assaulted by you. There is no evidence of her surviving beyond that date. When her body was found on March the 4th, it soon became apparent that she met her death following a brutal and ferocious attack. She had received a terrible beating with bruises to her face and head, and also to her upper limbs, caused, no doubt, as she tried to fend off your attack. There is also evidence of strangulation. The fatal injuries were multiple stab wounds, at least 2 of which were delivered with severe force. On her right leg you daubed the words 'It was me' in red nail varnish. This macabre graffiti is said to be some kind of confession by you, a sign to the police that you are responsible for the killing, but I reject that notion utterly. If you had wanted to make clear to the police what you had done, you could have gone to them and told them, this act looks like an act of callous and cruel triumphalism. There was cruelty here because you desecrated the body of the woman you had just killed in order to proclaim what you had just done. This act is inconsistent with any immediate remorse on your part. It is said that you laid Imogen out on her bed because that is what you thought was right. That is a grotesque irony. There was nothing that you did on that day that can be described as right. Imogen was a young woman when she died. She was a mother of a young child. In killing Imogen, you have deprived that child of a mother, and Imogen's parents and siblings have been deprived of a daughter and a sister. Their grief is palpable. You can rot in the ISO cubes. My sentence is just life. We're lopping your balls off though first. Can't risk you spreading your seed. Now, as we are done here, I'd very much like to know what you all think. Please do let me know in the comments down below. I hope you'll have a fantastic day, except for Daniel Smith, and thank you all very much for listening.